Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. Yes, thank you. All right, we got a lot to get to, man. I'm here live at the Build Studio in New York City, and man, I am so excited about this one. I'm wasting no time. We're jumping right in, all right? Our first guest this week is adventurer and avid explorer Josh Gates. On Travel Channel's Expedition Unknown, Josh sets out on a global journey to find the truth behind some of history's most captivating unsolved legends. This season is all about icons, from discovering the true origins of Stonehenge to exploring beneath the pyramids of the Mayan Empire. Season 4 has been consistently operating at about a 10 so far, but this Wednesday cranks it up to 11 as Josh embarks on a tireless quest to potentially uncover the true identity of one of the most powerful women in all of human history, Nefertiti. Guys, we're going to take a look at a video before we bring Josh out here, but I am telling you, this show is bananas. Luke, let's go ahead and run that clip, please, man.
This is known as an Artex Spider, and this is a very advanced piece of 3D imaging kit. This thing will take hundreds and hundreds of images, and it is accurate well under millimeter accuracy. So this will be able to give us a full 3D image of the mummy's head, which can then be used as the basis for a forensic reconstruction.
We fire up the imaging equipment, and soon we're ready to get started.
Okay, Aiden, so you're just going to tap record there.
Okie dokie.
And away we go.
I carefully hover over the mummy and begin working.
So the idea here is to really just paint the mummy with light, going over it in an even arc to get even coverage of everything.
The device captures almost 8 frames every second. The computers receive the data and stitch it together in a single 3D rendering. Before our eyes, we see a digital version of the mummy take shape.
Guys, come on, the legendary Josh Gates, right here.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Oh, my goodness. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the show. Thank you so much for carving out some time to hang out with us. We got a lot to get to. We're going to talk about your special guest here in a moment, which is a huge deal, and I'm very excited to have with you. But before we get into all this and to take the deep dive, just how's Josh doing, man? How are you?
Josh is good. Josh is talking about himself in the third person for some reason.
Josh can pull that off somehow.
I'm great. You know, I'm really excited about this episode.
Yeah.
We haven't been to Egypt yet on Expedition Unknown, and this was an opportunity for us to do a really big 2-part expedition exploring some of these amazing women. So I'm excited. I'm really excited for all this to air.
Yeah, as you should be, man. I got a chance to look at the 2 episodes in advance, and it's just a phenomenal adventure.
Thanks.
You know, and reading about this season, talking about how it's all about icons and all these iconic areas that you're visiting going around the world. This particular story, these lost pharaohs, some of the most powerful women mankind has ever seen. Is this a story in particular that's been like on your list for a while that you've been excited to get to?
It has, because, you know, look, there are these women from ancient Egypt whose names we all know. Cleopatra, Nefertiti. But, you know, I think a lot of us, myself included, don't really know much about their actual stories. Nefertiti is kind of remembered as, you know, one of history's great beauties. And that's what most people know about her. There's this really famous bust of her in the Berlin Museum that made her kind of the poster girl for ancient Egypt. And I think that's what most people know about her. Okay, here's this great ancient beauty. And so her real story, though, and of Cleopatra and other women that we explore, Hatshepsut, who was an amazing ancient pharaoh, they have these really incredible stories that are way more interesting than the things we think we know about them.
Yeah. Well, what's really fascinating watching the show is there's those names that I wasn't necessarily as familiar with as the other ones. And then also the story about how their successors tried to erase them from history. Yeah. And sort of these fascinating things where you find hidden hieroglyphics under newer hieroglyphics and all these wonderful things. How much of that do you know going in? Like, is there ever a moment on a shoot where you're like, oh, we haven't gotten it yet, and then the moment where you go, well, this is the show. We found the thing we've been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really exciting things about Expedition Unknown is that we don't always know what's going to happen.
It's right there in the title.
It is a real expedition. So in some instances, you know, we kind of have a sense, okay, we know we need permissions to go to a certain place, we need visas, we need permits. So some of it we kind of know where we're headed. But a lot of the in-scene discoveries, a lot of the things that happen are really just these things that happen in the moment where we're working alongside these really incredible explorers and archaeologists, and we're there with them at moments of discovery. So for me, that's the most exciting part of the show. When we can have that authentic moment of discovery and share that with our viewers, that's the best.
Yeah, that is, and it is authentic, and it is what makes it so exciting, and it's why I refer to the show as Bananas, because there are these moments where it's like, oh, they couldn't possibly have staged that. He just went down there and found this thing. That's a legit discovery.
Yeah, and I think also for me, you know, one of the things we always try to do on the show is kind of show all aspects of the journey. If there's a flat tire, bad food, something goes wrong, you know, we show that because anyone who's traveled anywhere knows, you know, a lot of travel doesn't go the way you want it to, right? A lot of adventure is misadventure. So we try to keep a lot of that in the show. So, you know, occasionally I'm eating disgusting things and throwing up and, you know, things like that.
What is your, forgive me if this was answered in a previous episode, but you really seem to not like camels a whole lot.
I hate them. Yeah. I have.
What
it's
is
like,
up
no,
with
it's
that?
like my whole career, every time, because they hate me, right? I'm big, I'm heavy, like camels, they want nothing to do with me. So they see me and they're immediately like, no. They really are. They are the a-holes of the desert. They're not
that?
like a horse. A horse is great. A horse is like, all right, let's do this. You know, if you get a really well-trained horse, there's no such thing as a well-trained camel. They bite, they spit, they hate having somebody sitting on top of them, or they hate me sitting on top of them.
Is that perhaps part of the reason why you put off the Egypt trip? Because you knew there was.
I knew.
It's just a big part of it. It's unavoidable.
And we did a scene where we opened the 2-part special with me. You know, we said, "Oh, we'll have you on a camel in front of the pyramids." I'm like, guys, I know exactly how this is gonna go. And I got up in the thing, wouldn't move, wouldn't walk, just grunting, making these horrible noises. Yeah. Every time I would try to say something, it would just be like, ugh.
But there's this great part, and the reason I bring it up, it's an amazing part of the series. It totally caught me off guard, where you're like giving this exposition and talking about, we're going to do that, and then out of nowhere, this sound of the camel just cuts you off.
Yeah, we left it in. We just left it in, ruining the take.
Warts and all,
yeah, because that's what they do. They're jerks.
Oh, my gosh. That is unbelievable. How long are you guys out there for? You, especially like a 2-parter like this? You seem to be all over the place. You're taking a big journey, trips here to here. You're underwater, you're under pyramids. Yeah. How long does that all take for you to do?
It depends on the show. For the Egypt expedition, we were there the better part of a month. Wow. So a really long time, you know. And we really went all over the country. We were in Cairo and Giza, and then up to Alexandria, and way far down the Nile toward Aswan. So it was a big trip. So that one took us almost a month.
That's insane. A whole month. Wow. That's got to be, well, all right, I want to talk about a couple of different things now, but I imagine having a family, right? Because does that make, it's dumb to say doesn't make it harder. Obviously it makes it harder, but I'm curious how it affects maybe like your decision making when you're out there and you're doing these things now. Because you've been doing this for some time. You've been an adventurer for a while. And now you got, you know, wife and kid waiting for you at home. What's going on in your head that's different that you can sort of identify?
It is a little different now. You know, when it was just my wife and I would go off on these trips and everything seemed to be, you know, working great. And the minute that a baby comes along, now it's like suddenly it gets a lot harder to travel. Because, you know, they grow so, like I go away for a month, I come back, it's like a different kid, right? I mean, they grow really fast. So now it's a lot more difficult. I mean, that, you know, people always say, oh, you have this amazing job, you get to see the world, and that's true. I would never, you know, complain. It's a complete privilege to do what I do. But it comes at this, there is a collateral cost there, right? So I spend between 200 and 250 days out of the year abroad. So it's a huge amount of time away. So it is a lot harder. And yeah, now I'm a little more cautious. I'm all about redundancies now. Like, it's like, we're going to clip you into this. It's like, let's put 2 clips, you know? So now it's all about backup systems.
For sure. Well, that dovetails, talking about backup systems, redundancies, and all that stuff. How do you handle fear? Because you've seen a lot of things, you've been a lot of places, you've traveled to places you're afraid of, but there's a great moment where all you've got to do all you've got to do is get in this bucket and drop 100 feet below ground, but you're dropping F-bombs left and right. You can't believe they want you to do this. You do it, you go through with it. How do you get over the hurdle of, this is terrifying?
Right, it helps to be stupid. So I'm like fairly stupid.
It goes a long way.
It goes a long way. No, often like there's this thing that takes over when I'm in the field where it just seems exciting. You know, you get this kind of like, oh, we're gonna go do something and it's gonna be really cool and let's crawl into this crazy tunnel. And it's not until I'm watching it that I'm like, don't go in there. Why would you go in there? That's insane. You know, so sometimes I think the adrenaline takes over and it seems like, oh, this is going to be really exciting. And don't forget, most of the things that are like this on the show are all about getting access to really incredible places where, you know, I have no right to be. some archaeologist is saying, we're going to invite you to go down into this insane tomb or into this tunnel. And I just am so excited about that opportunity that I kind of forget that I have to get in this. The thing he's talking about is this insane contraption at this site in Egypt where they had this little bucket that you had to stand in and then go down a 100-foot shaft to the bottom of this. I mean, it's insane.
My favorite part, and you call it out, is the one bar.
Yeah, they had a little bar that went over it. It was
The
like
rest of your body is exposed.
Totally. And then they turned it on and it went down like 1 inch at a time. Yeah, and I just swore the entire way down. So there's a lot of heavy editing to make that look all right.
It was absolutely amazing, but I guess I did sort of get it because once you got down there and you started exploring, granted there's tons of bugs that, how do they possibly survive down there other than being fueled by your nightmares, I suppose, and all these different things, but you're also making legit discoveries, finding these things nobody's seen. It hasn't seen the light of day for thousands of years. That moment. Talk about that moment. Do you remember your first discovery when you first found something like that?
I went to school for archaeology, and during the summers, I would volunteer at a site in Israel, which was this ancient Roman harbor. And I was part of this scuba team that would excavate in the harbor. And Romans would dump a lot of their garbage and stuff out of their ships before they would leave port. So you'd find stuff all the time. It was really, every day you'd find something. And I remember finding a really beautiful piece of almost what looked like a champagne glass. It was Roman glass, had this beautiful flute, and it was like part of a glass. And I remember thinking, somebody had this on a ship. They probably dropped it, and they picked it up and put it over the side. And thousands of years later, I'm the next person to touch that. That's the really incredible thing. When you find some piece of the past and you know that it was crafted by somebody, it was made by somebody, a person whose identity is lost, a person whose whole family tree might be gone, But to have that link to the past, that's, for me, when that first happened, I thought, oh, I'm hooked. This is really cool.
It's pretty amazing. I kind of enjoy the image of them being on the boat, putting their drink down for a second on the railing, turning around.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic.
It becomes human. It's not just this mythology of these people that existed thousands of years ago that you can't wrap your head around or fathom. It's like, oh, they were people. They had cups and mugs and things, and they did what we did. They just did it back then.
And that's the tough thing about the ancient past, is that it's hard to see people. It's hard to see individuals, right? We see empires and events and wars and things like that. But, there were people hanging out just like you and me, doing interviews.
Yeah. I'm pretty curious. Again, I'm made of questions when it comes to this bust, so we're going to get to that. But I am also curious. You went to school for archaeology. When did you get bitten by the bug? Like, how early did you decide, this is what I want to do? I'm going to go to school for this. Like, how far back? Did your brain explode when you saw Indiana Jones? Like, what?
Yeah. No, I'm a huge I mean, that's the start of it, was the Goonies and Indiana Jones. That's the genesis of all of it. And no, I was hooked. I've seen the Goonies 1 million times. I've seen Raiders 1 billion times. So as a kid, I loved all that. My father was a deep sea commercial diver, so he was always coming back from these exotic places. My mom's British, so we were going over to England every year to see my family there. So from an early age, I had a real travel bug. And then I didn't really know what to do with it. I went to school for drama and archaeology, to the absolute dismay of my parents, like the two lowest earning majors you could possibly choose, right? And they were like, what would you ever do with this? And I was like, I don't know. And then somehow, through, the mystery of the universe, it turned into kind of a combination of those things.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we got to get to this because I do have to eventually turn it over to the audience Q&A. But this particular bust that's here with you on stage today.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about this. This is remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's basically the conclusion of the clip we got to see earlier, all of that scanning that you guys were doing.
Yeah.
This, after months and tons of work and research, is the end result of that beginning process.
It is. So this is the end of a really long journey. There is a mummy that is sitting in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. She's known as the Mummy of the Younger Lady. And she was discovered at the end of the 1800s in a tomb out in the Valley of the Kings. And it wasn't really known who she was. There were 3 mummies in this tomb. They were all really badly damaged. Part of her jaw is broken. They were robbed in antiquity by tomb raiders. One of the mummies turned out to be the mother of the pharaoh Akhenaten, who was this really important pharaoh in Egyptian history. And then in 2010, a genetics test confirmed that this mummy of the younger lady is in fact King Tut's mother. And so that was a really big deal, because this mummy that had been sort of cast off suddenly was the mother of one of the most famous pharaohs of all time. So King Tut's mother is the younger lady. King Tut's father was the pharaoh Akhenaten, and Akhenaten was married to Nefertiti. So you have this kind of triangle forming of, if this is Tut's mother and his father was married to Nefertiti, we have a really good chance that this is actually Nefertiti. And, you know, Nefertiti was sort of forgotten by history until this bust was found that's now in Berlin. It's known as the Berlin bust. It's this iconic image of this beautiful limestone bust of this woman. And it kind of catapulted her to fame as the most beautiful woman of the ancient world. And that's how we've kind of come to remember her. And in fact, though, Nefertiti was like a serious badass. She was really, really cool.
The face of a badass right
yeah,
there,
I mean, so Nefertiti was not just a queen, she was a pharaoh of Egypt. I mean, she ruled Egypt, which you're talking 3,000 years ago, this incredibly significant woman. And we basically said, okay, if this mummy is Tut's mother, let's see if we can rebuild her and see if she resembles the known depictions that we have of Nefertiti, because there are these images of her from the ancient world. So the mummy's head was scanned using really impressive 3D technology, which we saw a little bit of in the clip. It was then sent to a facility in Colorado that printed a 3D replica of her head. So we had a perfect copy of the mummy's head. And then that was given to this really extraordinary woman named Elizabeth Dainez in Paris, who's one of the world's foremost reconstruction artists. Yeah. She's a paleo artist, and she, working with a team of forensic experts in France, were able to rebuild her face really accurately. The technology, the forensic technology is incredible.
I have a really dumb question about the forensic technology, because I'm fascinated by the ability to take somebody's skull and do this. So we've done this, and we've compared it to the existing bust and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Have they ever tested this reconstruction technology or applied it in an instance where we had an actual photograph of the person they were reconstructing? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, we've done this, and this is amazing. We can only assume that maybe this is spot on.
Right. So they have done that, and it proves to be incredibly accurate.
So they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And in fact, the artist who did this was also responsible for a reconstruction of King Tut's face in 2005. It was on the cover of Nat Geo. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
She did her reconstruction, and at the same time, the FBI did their own reconstruction based on the skull, and they were in separate lanes, and then they compared them at the end, and they were almost identical.
Is this all in the last, that last bit that wasn't in my screener, the little, is this all part of
Seeing all this, exactly, yeah. So the process is incredibly accurate. I mean, we are looking for sure at a very accurate depiction of this woman. So,
absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and for me, it's really exciting, because what we have here is someone who does resemble these ancient depictions of Nefertiti. She does look like the Berlin bust. She does look like another famous bust of her in Cairo. But also, she's a real person. You know, what we see here is someone who is an actual person. She's not this idealized ancient piece of art. This is a real woman. This is a real substantial person. And to be able to sort of look her in the eye, you get this real connection of like, oh my God, this is a person.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Does it... when dealing with ancient history and going back that far, you have to, I guess, come to terms with you'll never have absolutes, but you can get really close to knowing what the story is. Like you said, we have this triangle, we have the DNA, we have a lot of but ultimately it was thousands of years ago, so you're never gonna be 1,000% sure. But this is as close to sure as we could possibly be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can say almost to a surety that you're looking at the face of King Tut's mother. The genetics are pretty bulletproof on that front. So we know this is Tut's mom, you know, and that in and of itself is extraordinary, because this is the queen mother of one of history's greatest pharaohs. So that in and of itself is, that I think we know. In terms of the Nefertiti question, you know, I think you're right. We're never going to be 1,000% sure. But there are no other great candidates for who Nefertiti could be. We know that she was married to Akhenaten. She vanishes from history kind of suddenly, which is very strange. It has been theorized that possibly she was murdered. This mummy has extensive damage to its jaw that actually fits that narrative. It's possible that it was a death blow. So this sort of emerging story of Nefertiti fits very nicely with this mummy. The genetics fits quite nicely. So myself, our Egyptologist, our forensic partners in this feel really positive about it, that this may likely be her.
You can definitely feel confident, like we've done a lot of good work here. We've got a pretty good story. Last thing I'll ask before we get to the audience is, how does confirming all this, how does having this bust and reaching this point, how does that sort of change or impact the story that we know moving forward? How does it change future expeditions and
I think that all of this technology, both the DNA technology, the forensics technology, the artistry of this, it just allows us to reach back into the past and to see the past in a different way. I think that, you know, look, this is an interpretation. It is a reconstruction. I think it's highly accurate, but it is one tool of many, right? And so I think for us what's exciting is that you can look at this and really feel like you're connecting with a person. It's kind of like if you have a dinosaur bone. You look at a dinosaur bone and you go, wow, that's interesting. Then when you assemble them all into a model, you stand in front of it and go, oh, this is really incredible. And then when you, through the magic of CG and other technology, now we sort of feel like we're getting a better understanding of what these creatures looked like. This is, I was just gonna say, this is a way for us to start to really put a face, literally, on the past.
Didn't we find out recently that a lot of dinosaurs had feathers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's crazy.
All right, we're going to turn it over to the audience. We got some microphones in the room. The first one's going to come from right over here.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I was wondering, as an archaeologist, since now with technology, maybe it's a little bit easier to find new discoveries. Is it harder and harder to find new things where, like, maybe things are like a lot of things have already been discovered or things are already
It's a
known?
great question because I think a lot of people feel this. You know, I think one of the things that I love about making the show so much is that I get to learn and get to share with people just how much is still out there to be discovered in the world. I think that we all kind of feel here in the 21st century with our phones in our pockets that, like, everything's been mapped, everything's known. And in fact, you know, it couldn't be further from the truth. There's an upcoming, not to pivot off of our Egypt show, but we have an upcoming episode in Guatemala where we visit an archaeologist who's working at a Mayan ruin in Guatemala. This is a city in the northern part of Guatemala, deep in the jungles, that's roughly the size of Los Angeles, and they've excavated about 2% of it. So everywhere you look in these jungles, you see these huge hills, and you say, what's that? And they say, oh, that's a pyramid. I say, what's that? Oh, that's a temple. Well, what's under there? Well, we don't know. You know, so, I mean, the depth of what's out there, I mean, just in the last 48 hours, they've announced 2 discoveries in Egypt. They found near the pyramids a royal tomb there, a tomb of a noble there, and they're continuing to do work in King Tut's tomb. I mean, King Tut's tomb is the size of this stage, right? It's quite small space, and now they're saying, wait a minute, there might be chambers hidden behind these walls we don't know about. So there's a ton of stuff still out there, and I think if there's one thing I hope to share on the show, it's to highlight the work of these archaeologists and to let people know there's still a ton of mystery in the world.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
You have that really cool scanner you're using in the beginning in that clip that we saw that led to this. Is there like a holy grail of like technology or a tool that you're really hoping for or excited for that will change the game in terms of exploration?
I think from a kind of, you know, whiz-bang cool perspective, it's LiDAR. And LiDAR is this laser technology where you take this unit, you strap it to the bottom of a helicopter or a plane, and you fly over jungles, you fly over anything. And this technology essentially maps the ground underneath it. And if you have like this thick jungle canopy, it actually can see through it to what's underneath. So it's insane technology. It's like magic technology.
That is awesome.
And so this is the technology that's helping archaeologists locate huge temple complexes and hidden cities, lost temples all over the world. But all of that still has to happen in conjunction with ground truthing, going out there, doing the work, conserving these places. So even the coolest technology is really only one part of a much more complex puzzle of like having to actually go and do the work.
Very cool. Next question is from right over here.
Hi. So since you've been to many places all over the world, what is one of your favorite accomplishments of in one of your travels?
I think for me, I think you're looking at one of them. I'm really proud of her. I'm just so proud of all the people that came together to help make this reconstruction. I think for me, I'm most pleased about all of the opportunities to take viewers to places that are really difficult to get to. You know, this story in Guatemala that's coming up this season, this is a really, really difficult, you know, remote place. And so to be able to go there, to be able to take our viewers around the world to these spots that, you know, most of us just won't get a chance to see, I think I'm most proud of that. I think just trying to highlight these incredible places around the world and to highlight stories like hers.
Was it after being like at the end of such a long road and like the culmination of all these efforts and all these people working together? Was it very emotional the first time you saw the finished product, or were they sending you updates as it was happening, or no? Was it like
we
a big
saw
reveal?
a few updates of the construction. We saw clay. We saw a little bit of a silicone pour, but it was very like, oh, that looks creepy and weird, and there's like eyeballs and a weird half-finished head, and it wasn't until and I really had no idea about the accessories, which I have to say are kind of outstanding too, right?
It's gorgeous.
So it wasn't until I really got to the artist studio in Paris last week that I saw the whole thing. Her crown is made from dyed banana leaf. The jewelry was handmade by designers who work for Dior. I mean, it's like they went all out on this. So it wasn't until I saw her in the studio that I kind of had that gasp moment of like, oh my God, that's like a real person.
That's it. We did.
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, you don't know if it's going to look amazing or like some weird like Pirates of the Caribbean, like, you know what I mean? Like wax mannequin, but she looks awesome. So I was, and of course I'm terrified, right? Like I don't want all of this to end in some like bizarro, you know, thing. So I was just so thrilled that it turned out so well. I mean, I just owe a huge amount of props to Elizabeth Daynez, the artist, who's just outrageously talented.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. All right, we've got time for one last question, and it's going to be right over here.
Hi.
Are there any countries that you haven't visited yet, but you want to?
Yes, so many. I have been to just over 100 countries. There's like 190 or so out there, so a lot. I'm currently I really want to go to the Seychelles and the Maldives and all that stuff in the Indian Ocean, which I haven't ever visited before. Sri Lanka, places like that. The other thing, though, is like, you know, sometimes I'll go to a country, like it's like, oh, I'm going to China. I'm going to see China. And then you get to China and you're like, let me look at a map of China. And you're like, oh no, China's huge, you know? So you can go to a country, you go to India, you can go to China, and you go to a couple cities and you've seen nothing. You know, you've seen, 1% of it. So for me, there are so many countries I want to visit, but there's so many other places that I've been to and I still feel like I haven't really seen, you know? There's a lot out there.
Do you ever well, you're a natural explorer, so I doubt maybe like a family vacation. You take a tour so that way you could see some of China?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not against tours. I'm not against organized travel. I think that in some cases, organized travel can be great. I mean, if you get paired with the right person, they can open a site to you and show you and teach you in ways that you're not going to get out of just walking around with a guidebook. Yeah. I'm a big believer in kind of both. You know, I don't love like things where you're just on a bus and you can't really be under your own steam at all. But I think that combination of like independent travel with really expert guides is awesome. I'm super into that.
Very, very cool. Well, Josh, regrettably, I got to let you go, but this has been a phenomenal, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see this, to see your work in person like this and appreciate it, talk to you about this amazing show. Expedition Unknown, everybody, Wednesdays at 9 on the Travel Channel, two-parter on Egypt. Honestly, I've been saying it, I'm going to say it again, it's bananas. You got to watch it, guys. It's an unbelievable show. Make some noise. Josh Gates, everybody, please.
Thanks, everybody.